Hello, it's Friday and I wanted to talk about my training that we had this morning before I forget some of it because today was really, I think, important and relevant to a lot of people. What we learned about, the topic was depression, and I don't think this is the only time we'll learn about depression or get trained about depression in our counseling training, but it was an introduction, and so we had like an hour video that we watched and then discussed it with the lead of our training for another hour or so, and asked all of our questions, which we had a lot of. So depression can, there's a lot of biblical examples of people who dealt with depression. It's very common. 1 out of 5 Americans it affects, and it can get pretty serious if it's ongoing, as we know. So some of the biblical examples of depression would be like in Job. If you've ever read Job, he had a reason to be depressed, obviously. So there are sometimes there are life traumas that cause depression, and it's temporary, and then sometimes it can become ongoing, like I said. So like the 5 S's of depression, things that you can have affect you when you start to feel like you have depression ongoing, are shame, stigma, separation from God, silence, and then suicidal thoughts. So those all begin with an S, so they're a little easier to remember, but this is something they said that we would deal with probably as the number 2 issue of people that are coming in for Christian counseling at our church. Number 1 is marital issues, and only like 20 or 21% of people who are struggling with depression actually get adequate treatment. So that's a very low number. So just know that if you are suffering with any type of depression that lasts more than about, I think it's 2 weeks, I have some handouts here that are really helpful, like the DSM for depression. I think it's like the diagnostic standard model, or I don't know what DSM stands for, diagnostic criteria. And of course, depression and anxiety often go together. So one can cause the other, and a lot of times they are intertwined. So say if you have, in a 2-week period, you have, it's affecting your functioning in life. So let's say you can't go to work, you can't get out of bed. This is a major problem. And so I wanted to talk about the physical effects that sometimes people don't realize, that some of the physical symptoms and signs that they have are actually symptoms of maybe depression, and you might not connect them, especially if you're a Christian and you don't want to admit to that, because a lot of religions tell you that as long as you're spiritually mature, you can find every answer in the Bible, and there's no need for counseling for depression. That shouldn't exist if you're using the right resources, the Bible, and praying and living the clean, good, godly life. Well, I mean, our church doesn't exactly subscribe to that. Obviously we don't. We have a counseling department. We want people to be healthy. We don't want to enable them to, have ongoing issues and not get them resolved. That's why we have the counseling department, so that people can, get through their fears, their problems, their issues, and move on to glory and living a life fully alive. So, if you have ongoing fatigue and dizziness and headaches and stomach problems, any digestive problems, and if you're not interested in, your mate at all, like sexually, no sexual desire, if you have menstrual problems, menopausal problems, if you have odd like joint pain or limb pain in your limbs, difficulty concentrating, these all could be, you know, signs that there's something bigger going on, you know, an ongoing stressor that you may need to go to counseling and walk through, you know. Someone asked in my class how many times a person is usually seen. Not necessarily just for depression, but for any issue. And our trainer said that it's usually, you know, maybe 4 to 8 times, maybe around 6 times. So if you think about it, you know, he's been doing this for years, like probably 10 years. So I think he has a pretty good idea of that number. And if you think about it, coming to a counselor like 6 or 8 times, 6 or 8 weeks, it's 2 months. What's, you know, you can definitely work that into your life, and it's going to be worth it. I've been to a therapist twice in my life before. Once back when I was still single, and then I was single both times actually, and then recently after I had gone through like a really bad breakup, and I just felt like I felt like my life was falling apart, and I just felt like I needed somebody to, you know, get me on course, get my thoughts in the right place, because I kind of had I felt like I had a dependency on this idea of this person that I thought I would, you know, end up marrying or something. So I needed to walk through counseling to let that go, and that was probably a period of maybe 2 months. And I mean, it was like every 2 weeks maybe that she was able to get me in. So it really helped. And when it was time to move on, it was time to move on. She told me, you know, you're a very intelligent person. I think you've got the tools you need. And she equipped me. So I do feel that it's very valuable to see a counselor if you need to. So we also got into a lot of the science of the brain, and this is where it gets really interesting, because so much of people's issues with feeling sad or not feeling right can be attributed to them just not taking care of themselves properly. And if you've read like the Bright Line Eating book, if you're in the Bright Line Eating tribe, you know all this already. And that's why this is the part that was really interesting to me. I mean, we got into a lot of brain science, neurobiology, and talking about the amygdala and hippocampus and HPT axis, pituitary, hypothalamus, pituitary, what is it? Pituitary thyroid axis, which is a big part of how your body and brain are going to function, which I'm also learning about in the metabolic renewal program. Dr. Jade Tata talks about that a lot. So all this science was totally interesting to me, even though they went through it way too fast for anyone to actually absorb. But I have notes here that I can refer back to. But you know, there are lots of, you could also have like diabetes, and that could cause depression or cancer. And if your body's unhealthy, if your brain is unhealthy, your nerves are not going to be regenerating like they should be. Your cells are not going to be regenerating like they should be, and you'll get a shrinking of the, is it hippocampus? Let me make sure I have that right. I'm not sure, but you get a shrinking of, yeah, I think it is the hippocampus. There's actual, you know, scans that they show where that has shrunk in a person who's had ongoing years of depression. Glial cells are a big deal too. They are like the resource for nerve cells, and those will just start to not function properly, and that's, you know, that's responsible for neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. So making healthy nerves and having dendritic spikes. So this is all kind of sciencey, and I don't really get it because I'm not like a biology science nerd. I mean, I do like it, but I don't know a lot about it. But here's something about inflammation and inflammatory cytokines. So those are something that I've heard about in metabolic renewal again. And short term, those are necessary, good to have, like if you're in a fight or flight situation. Inflammatory cytokines take care of you in that situation. But if you have chronic stress, then these start to turn off the glial cells, which are the regenerative cells, the ones that are in charge of that. And that can in turn turn off your mitochondria. So all this can be affected by obviously poor sleep patterns, diet, exercise, and prayer life. If you're a Christian, having a good, steady prayer life. So those are just, like our teacher was saying, Sunday school basics. Just get back to the Sunday school basics. Eat a healthy diet. Don't eat sugar all the time. And, like with bright line eating, I feel like this is so related to that. And I really enjoyed learning about the science and getting into that part of it. So it's going to be interesting. I have never taken like anti-anxiety or depression drugs myself, so I don't have experience with that. I have never felt like a major depressive state. I've gone through difficult things, but it's never lingered for, I wouldn't say, more than 2 weeks, or it's never been something that I didn't feel like I could get past. So it's going to be good for me to learn to relate to people who have and who are going through this. And I think it's going to be useful for me to hear some stories about it and how, it affects your life, and to be able to overcome that. And I feel like the basic things that we're learning, not that, counseling is going to be so, I think he said like 15% of it is what you know as a counselor. The rest is just being there. So 85%, or I don't remember what the numbers were exactly, but he said like in a study like 30% of people had a placebo effect of just showing up to counseling. They were just better, like after the first time, just sitting there and talking. So I think just taking the initiative to take care of yourself is it's a big step when something like this is happening to you, because I think there's a tendency to isolate, and that's not it's not good for you. So those are just some thoughts for now, and I have a lot of notes, so maybe once I have my thoughts collected better, I can speak in a more intelligent manner on the subject. But I just thought I would get those initial thoughts on video. So hope you're having a good day. Thanks for joining me. Bye.